Welcome back to Educational Warfare. I'm Dr. Jordan Lauer, here today with my partner, Dr. Ryan Jackson. I want to do a shout out to our producers, Tommy Ruth, and our director, Matt Paff, who make all the great visuals, wonderful production, and frankly keep us from having a 5-hour-long podcast, which could be problematic. It could be awesome, depends on the topic. Please remember, follow us on Blue Sky. We are on X at EDU Warfare. You can email the show at educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com. And now you can watch full episodes of our show on Spotify and the Educational Warfare YouTube channel. That's right. You can watch us. You can listen to us taking on the issues that are attacking education. So please subscribe to the Educational Warfare channel on YouTube and tell your friends and coworkers and come join the discussion and join the fight. So, Ryan, by the power of Grayskull, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited about this episode. I think like a lot of our listeners, I just need to know about this topic. So I'm definitely ready to dig in.
Well, just like some of the legendary swords, we're here, beautiful cadet toys and comics and Spring Hill hanging out. And, just like some of the legendary swords of the great 80s and 90s cartoons and movies, today's topic can kind of be one of those double-edged swords. I know what a charter is. It's an agreement. Now know what a voucher is, but what are those things for schools is what we're talking about today. Charter schools and vouchers.
Yeah,
so,
and listen, I've been a public education guy, man, for a long time, as I know you have, and that is one thing that I've always been curious about, speculative about, at times concerned about, and I think that's sort of hitting fever pitch. So I'm ready to dig into this. I know you've got a ton of great content to kind of unpack here for us today, man. Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's pull that sword from the stone. Let's explain first what charter schools are and what vouchers really are. So let's get to it. So first of all, charter schools. Let's start with that. So basic definition, just like make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. They're independently run public schools with more flexibility in curriculum and operation, but they have to meet specific performance standards set out in their charter agreements. That's why they're called charters. So they're not part of a school district. They just kind of pop up, but they make an agreement with the state and say, this is what we're going to do. So a little bit in numbers here. 7% of all public school students attend charter schools, according to the NCES. So not a huge number, but it's growing. Kind of one of the issues here is they serve as an alternative to the traditional public schools, but remain publicly funded. And that's where it gets controversial because they're outside. You don't have to be tied to a district, but they're still receiving that money that would go to public schools.
But, and I got to jump in as I normally do. So two things immediately come to mind, and I'm not going to let this first one slide.
Right.
You said they have flexibility in curriculum and operations. Man, that sounds like a euphemism for something. So I'm going to want a deeper explanation on that part. And the second piece is, you've mentioned now, they're not a part of a district. But it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, charters are constantly getting voted on by districts. I'm going to speak to Metro Nashville Public Schools specifically. It seems like they're always voting on this or that charter or discontinuing that charter. Are they not a part of Metro Public Schools?
No, not really. Like they exist outside. It's almost like they're their individual district, but they don't have, like the Metro board does not rule them. They usually have their own board of directors, or some type of leadership structure. And they, like I said, they receive state and local money. So this is where we get kind of to it. And, a lot of people say, oh, are they nonprofits? Here's the issue. Kinda. Right? That's where we get, again, there's a lot of gray areas.
Kind of nonprofit?
Yeah. So like many are run by nonprofits.
So they're not a 501c.
Right, yeah.
They're a 508. Whatever.
They're just they're run by nonprofit management organizations that they often call charter, like they're just called CMOs or charter management. But some states allow for-profit companies to run them, called educational management organizations or EMOs, to run the schools. And that's like, when you have a for-profit thing running a school, schools don't really make money. So one of the issues, and we'll get to this when we get talk about some controversies with them, but just kind of quickly getting that definition, they can just shut down. Like if it's run by a for-profit, they can just be like, bye.
Door closed, shuttered,
kids show up.
Good luck. Backpack on, I'm at the door. And
like, hey guys.
Boards over it.
Yeah, it's like it's like when you go to a store thinking to be open, but they have the sign up to holiday hours, and you're like, oh man. That like some kids show up and that's literally like, we are now closed. please call your local school district to see what school you should attend.
Man, all jokes aside, we record this in Spring Hill. Man, that recently happened to me at my doctor's office.
Oh, really?
Like the
down.
doctor's office just closed. Just appointments, patients, all of that. Just good luck.
That's crazy.
Yeah. For sure.
I'd be like, I need help.
So I'm thinking of these kids now, like I
Right.
was when I'm going to get my physical or my blood work. And I'm like, yeah, I got an appointment. And
Yeah,
there's like a sign on the door.
Yeah, you're just like turned away.
Wow.
So the other thing that we're talking about today that goes with this are vouchers, like school vouchers, right?
Man, so much involved in that.
Yeah, they're all over the news. If you missed this, for teachers out there, obviously this is something we're watching and monitoring and just a lot of questions about. And that's why we're covering here today, so you guys understand, so you guys can get that knowledge, so you can have that in your toolbox. That way when something goes down, you're ready. And that's what we're trying to do.
So you're going to be able to explain to us today, because, man, this has been a hot button issue for so long. I think of the Willy Wonka ticket, man. Like, I got my ticket, so I've got my voucher.
Yeah.
Tell me about these vouchers, dude, that everybody's scrambling about, vouchers.
Yeah, so the basic thing is they're programs that allow parents to use public funds to pay for private or religious school tuition. So it's the state's giving you this type of thing, this voucher, this like you said, golden ticket, and then you can use that to apply to the tuition. It's basically the reason you might say, why do we need this? Like public schools are here, private schools are there. If you want to go to private school, go to private school. If you want to go to public school, don't.
Right.
This is all part of the, I'm not going to say new, but the now to the forefront, very much recent program that's supposed to have allowing parents to basically have more choice in their schools. That's how it's being sold. Like, look, if your school's bad, and we understand that, we're teachers, and sometimes you get in an area where the school there that the kids have to go to isn't the best. There's many options for that. So this is supposed to be like, okay, if you don't like that, here's a way to go somewhere else using that public school money, so you're not chained basically or tied to a school district or a school close to you.
So of course, man, my brain is automatically going to, but if everyone wanted to exercise that option, not a possibility.
No.
Right. So then it gets into, I guess now we're talking lottery.
Right,
Remember the lottery days? Like, so we're back to that kind of idea.
There's vouchers, there's educational savings accounts, which we're going to talk about in a bit, called ESAs, that's going to have this, and it does cause a lot of issues. Just some examples, for example, there's rapid growth here in the state of Tennessee.
For sure.
Florida has pushed them. The voucher expanding their program in Arizona has really been blown up a little bit, and we'll get into that. But here's a question kind of that we can talk about real quick. Are these initiatives, like vouchers, charter schools, truly about empowering families, or a little bit of conspiracy corner here?
I knew it was coming.
Right? Or are they dismantling, or are they planning on dismantling public education? What could the motivations of the people behind them be? That's kind of look here, because it's really, you're almost on a teeter-totter. I totally get if you're in an area where the school's not the best, you want your kid to have an education, like have the best education possible. You want to be able to go somewhere. Okay? And then so these vouchers are like, oh, here's a private school. The problem is those private schools can still say no. It's not like if you have this, you have to get in.
Oh, they can still reject you even with the voucher.
It's literally just in this. In the case of Tennessee, it's just $7,000 off of their tuition. So it's basically like this makes it basically where you have a little bit more time. A little bit like you can look around, but you can use it to like, hey, I don't want to pay this much, but this lets us get in. But they can still say no, and it's usually obviously not the price of the full tuition.
Okay.
So it's school choice, but it's really who's getting to use this choice. And we'll talk about it here in just a few, how the families using it really aren't exactly, or a lot of times aren't exactly the families they intended.
But you mentioned 7,000. Is that pretty standard? Is that the number?
From looking around, I mean, it depends. And 7,000 is usually, it's all on state budgets. Okay. So they can literally say, hey, we want to do, if our budget's this, it's this. If it's lower, it's lower. That's usually a standard thing. But then, and we were getting this problem, you kind of get where the private school then raises their tuition. So that's 7,000 is no longer 7,000 because the people are getting in.
Of course, right? They're gonna bake it into the
So they're like, oh, well, it was 10, but since you got 7, we're gonna make it 14 now. So you get a 50%. That way they make more money, and it becomes more selective. A lot more families can afford maybe $3,000 to get their kid there, but they can't afford $5,000.
Yeah.
Or can't afford whatever they prove the price up to, so that way it's still being selective. So there's some games.
Man, but I still want to go back to that question. Are we empowering families, or is this some kind of nefarious, plan, conspiracy to undermine and ultimately destroy public education? And before you go, I know, when I was working in Nashville, right? So I'm a assistant principal at this time in my career. I'm working at a school in Nashville, and we just hired a guy out of a charter to come in. Okay. So he's now a public school teacher. He's working where I'm serving as assistant principal. He'd just come out of charter, and cool dude. And he's explaining sort of his past 3 years.
Right.
And this is really my first insight into charter schools, specifically in Nashville. And I can just remember it was this feeling of exhaustion, back to some of our previous episodes, like they were really feeling it because it sounded like you made less, you worked more, your responsibilities were compounded, meaning I think he said something like everyone who was employed had to coach something or run some kind of after-school program. That was a given, right? And just this expectation, that you were going to nose to the grindstone, almost because you want to be here and not over there.
Right.
So if you don't play by these rules, we'll cast you out,
throw you to the wolves
as well. So I just always wondered about that, again, back to that point of undermining and the conspiracy here. Man, he was a good dude,
right?
And I've always wondered, like, the people that work in those buildings, the administrators, the teachers. These are people just like us. They're educators just like us. I struggle with conspiracy theories at times because of this.
Right.
There's no way all these people involved are like on that program, right? Like,
absolutely.
hey, this is the mission. Here's what we're coming in to do.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know, man. You're going to have to really sell me on this
and
one.
I totally get that. And there's some great people, obviously, they're educators. They're trying to do what we do. Educate children and trying to do it a different way. And like you said, a lot of it is people, teachers who don't want to go into, especially in inner cities. You see this a lot, like charter schools are. They're very set behavioral standards. Like I said, they have to get in there. Private schools, same way. You can still say no. You still have to afford it. And then they're just basically, if you don't meet our behavior standards, we don't have to have 20 meetings and all these different processes. It's goodbye.
That's back to that operations point you brought up earlier, where they have this flexibility in curriculum, which I still think is interesting too. And I think we've got to touch on that.
Yeah, we definitely will.
But also operations, i.e. who we accept, who we kick out and when, all of that kind of jazz.
And who we can support. That's one thing. And I've been I've done a tour of a couple charter schools, and when you talk about they teach a different way, it is kind of crazy. I was in one, and their teacher, their curriculum is scripted for a lot of them. So when you go in, it's not, when I'd make a lesson, it's, I'm going to teach this. I kind of want to do this. It is scripted for a lot. It is almost down to what you say specifically. And then they have ways of doing things. The class I was in, the students would, when they asked a question, when the teacher asked a question, the students would raise their hand. The teacher would pick one, like we always do in every school. But then he would say, track, and all the kids would look at that student. And as they talked, and he'd go, and the student would answer. The teacher would say if it was right or wrong, and then he'd go, track me, and they'd all look back. And it was very, me sitting in the back, it was very kind of robotic.
I'm just going to say it, man. That's strange.
It is, yeah. It was like, I'm sitting there like, I mean, this
or I shouldn't say strange. That's different. That's certainly going to be different than your experience.
Right, yeah.
In a public school.
Some schools, public school teacher, sometimes you're like, excuse me, guys, hey, I'm over here. Can you pay attention to me now? And this was just like those heads snapped. It was like a military,
Were they wearing uniforms?
They were.
Okay.
Yeah, the kind of the classic, polo with
polo.
Girls had
some
the
khakis.
Yeah, khakis.
Not the skirts, bro.
They did. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
The girls had that. Guys had khakis. So it was very, kind of old school in that type. So these schools are, when we talk about, are they, trying to dismantle it? I think when you say the operational people, the people in charge, no. It's the whole idea behind it, because this is what we talked about last week with our educational smackdown, Linda McMahon being nominated to be the Secretary of Education of the United States. What's her end goal? That's what we talked about. And it's kind of on that. This has been an area to where a lot of people have wanted to make money. every student in America goes to some type of school. Like legally they have to. So this is an area where
that could be monetized.
Yes.
The idea is here, this is some low-hanging fruit. We're not taking advantage of this.
Right.
So we've put Linda McMahon. She's going to come in here and DDT public education so we can start this back over through a capitalist lens and start making some cash.
And charter schools are a way to do that. And the easy way to make that sell is you just say, it's a parent choice. We want you to pick where your kid's going to school. Don't let this. And that makes a lot of parents like, yes, I will. And
but the underlying question there, though, is, okay, they're going to make that choice. Why? Because they are better? Because they're different? I'm going to go there because they're safer? I mean, what is the reason? And I know there's lots of different reasons that parents, I'm sure, make that choice. But I think that's one of the big questions for me is it's choice, and why are we choosing that choice?
I think it's selectivity. They are not, public schools, as in their name, you have to take everybody. It is, you're here, you're in there, welcome in.
That's right.
Where here it is, we're going to do it this way, or we're going to take this type of kid, or we're going to you have to have this GPA. So it is, all those things you said, safer, could be, if you think you have more academically inclined kids in a room, obviously you learn more because you don't have a kid like lighting a book on fire in the back, something crazy.
Less distractions, less delinquent behavior.
All the things that wrap up. So parents are like, they feel like my kid's going here. And then some of those things I talked about, those tactics we talked about where it's literally tracking, if you're a parent and you're seeing that, it does look impressive. My kid's going to sit in a class to where they listen to the teacher, they all look and give attention to who's talking. They even had their test, how sometimes we post test scores, but we have to we can't use the kid's name because we can't get him in trouble. They had the test up on the wall, taped to it with their grades on it in
just full transparency,
descending order.
Right.
Billy got 100, Jimmy down here with a 63.
Right.
And the kids just had to look
Jimmy's
at it.
on full blast.
Right. So you were there's that internal competition of so those kids are, and we can't really do that in public schools because there's so many other laws and things that, is that bullying a kid?
Man, so even the nature of charters competing against public drills all the way down to within the charter.
Yeah.
We create this kind of, competitive environment too. We're the best of the best in here and ranking you and all that stuff. And way different than public schools.
And those kids have to, that's just the way it is. So either you're going to, swim or sink in that situation. Where in public school we kind of go. So talking about vouchers and talking about charter schools, let's get into, 3 different blades, right? 3 swords. We're talking about them, so we have.
And you're on this sword theme,
dude.
Man.
I love a good sword.
You love a good sword.
Yeah, it's you see that when the sword comes out in a movie, you're like, this is going to be quality 3 to 5 minutes because there's going to be a sword fight. It's going to be fun. Somebody's going to be flipping over people. There's going to be a dramatic death or something. It's always a good time.
Yeah.
So,
man, I'm gonna throw one at you real quick. Have you seen the movie Rob Roy?
I have a long time ago.
Man, Rob Roy, Tim Roth, one of my favorite actors, man, in Reservoir Dogs. Love that dude.
Great actor.
Man, if you have not seen that in a while, go watch the ending sword fight in Rob Roy.
I'm ready.
Off the chain, man.
So
anyway,
time for a rewatch.
That's my nugget for you today, right? If you love a good sword fight.
I'm in. So let's talk about the good, the bad, the controversial.
Let's go.
Real quick of charter schools and vouchers. So the good, obviously, sticking with swords, man, Excalibur, right? So what's the good here? Like Excalibur, which represents freedom, goodness, and growth, there are positives. I don't want to just sound negative. Like I said, it's conspiracy corner we kind of dip into sometimes, but that's not where I live. I just we want to talk about it. So some of the goods are it does increase parental choice and tailored educational opportunities. That way parents can say you're not stuck here. And then it kind of takes the pressure off the school. Like if your kid's still not performing, there's that. There is, we just talked about, there's competition driving innovation in some of these. You want more options for schools means they must compete to get students.
Man, everything you're saying right now is like speaking my language.
Right.
So far.
Yeah,
right.
It's not inherently bad. These are things you want because you can see the old model. I'm not going to say everything we've done is great because I think you always grow. But the old model, when you are the school in a town, who are you competing against?
Yeah.
You want the state to not say, hey, you need to raise your scores. You obviously want to perform, but you also don't have much pressure of we got to keep this up because we're losing kids to that building right there now. And we got to. So there is that, which competition is never a bad thing. I'm not saying it's not bad. They also, like you said, schools get lazy because it's you're zoned. So we're zoned here, so this is where it doesn't apply here. You can go anywhere. They often.
That's it. You can live on the other side of town.
Yeah.
And it's in this charter with your voucher. So it has nothing to do with.
Yeah, you're not There's no boxes drawn.
Geography.
If your parent can get you there,
right,
you can go.
And you got that golden ticket, man. You're getting there at a discount.
Right. It's like, hey, I'm here. Teach me. Yeah, it was a 30-minute drive, but if parents want to do that, they can, and that's a part of that freedom that they like.
But I like that Excalibur piece, man. If this school is not working, you know, whether it is just low student achievement, whether it is off the chain discipline, but it's not working, me and my family want another option. Boom, charter school presents itself.
Right.
I got options, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, what's the key to motivation, man? Autonomy, right? Whoo, I got some choice in this.
Yeah, and then the parents like that, and this is going to be right up your alley, especially I know, but they can often, where public schools kind of have to run the curriculum that's on the state tests,
yes,
right?
For sure.
Charter schools can take a little bit of alternative curricular approach and emphasize certain fields, so they can do arts, like we are a charter of the arts. We're focused on performing. Technology, we're going to really focus on this. Math, or the ever popular STEAM or STEM.
Nice, of
right?
course.
So,
yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Are they? But okay, so that's again, man. You're like filling my cup on
right.
this. We're still on Excalibur. I
yeah,
get it.
we're on
still
the good.
But when back to those student achievement, those standardized test scores, are they held to those measures? Like, is that accountability? You know,
yes and no. They don't have to report as much. There is not where states have to, even though they're getting here's we'll get into the controversy. But
yeah, I know you got it coming because I'm getting ready to ask. But I've heard
funding,
rumblings that in terms of outcomes, it's not. But we'll get there.
It's not even. Yeah.
So they are held to some kind of accountability measure.
Yes, and it's murky to say the best. To say it the easiest. But like I said, we'll kind of dive into that. They can they do STEAM. They can serve special populations. And there's a growing number of virtual. And here's the biggest thing. You see more and more kids doing this in school. There's now virtual or cyber charter schools, which have really, the thing they're doing here is they are challenging this idea of a brick and mortar physical school.
Okay.
Obviously COVID pushed all this into the forefront. Before COVID, things like GoToMeeting and Zoom were used for businesses or for like, hey, we can't be here, so we'll do that. And then it became just part of our zeitgeist. Like everybody was like, oh, we're going to Zoom. Even people, instead of just kind of the NFL. Several teams this past week Zoomed, interviewed all their coaches for the first round because it's like, why would we fly them out if we're not sure they're our finalists? So even the NFL is like now saying that. So for school, you have students who they can kind of set their schedule. I had one student literally this year, not long ago, walk up and be like, Dr. Lauer, I'm not going to be here after Christmas. I was like, oh man, what's going on? He's like, I really want to work. I'm old enough to work. I'm 17, so I really want to work. So I'm going virtual for school. And then I can kind of set my classes around when I can work instead of needing to be there. And schools have that. Like high schools have dual enrollment.
And they do.
High school
and
have
I
co-op.
even know one of the counties here nearby has a virtual academy that you can attend, which is for your non-traditional student that may need to blend work but still get some credits in order to finish. But I don't know even that particular model is like a full-time start from grade 3 to graduation. It was really for like a select group of students in high school that needed that kind of
right now those virtual or digital academies, you can call them, or charter schools, are more set towards high schoolers because and God bless you all and God love you all, any elementary teachers who did Zoom classes during COVID keeping like 20 or even obviously it'd be smaller class, but keeping like 5 elementary school kids engaged on a computer is just I couldn't do it. Like I had to do it with high schoolers, and these are grown people basically.
Were you and I working in the same county at the time when COVID happened, and then the year after COVID, because our county never shut down,
right?
So we had this blend of in-person and virtual simultaneous.
Yep.
So it was synchronous.
Man.
You had to manage what was happening in the classroom and cater to those that opted in for the virtual deal that was synchronous with you at the same time.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the pressure people were under at that time. So.
I remember having my laptop literally like sitting on a podium on like books so they could lecture to the class and the digital people could see me, and then kids behind me would be like, Dr. Lauer, like there's a notification. I think they got kicked off, so I'd have to like sit there and like get it.
Man.
It's like it was a thing.
Yeah, teachers to me, staked their claim are we really who we are who we say we are that
Right.
year. I mean, they proved it, man, when they went through that gauntlet.
Yeah.
And I know we're digressing there, but that was a tough year.
Yeah, well, I mean
sure.
that's part of it. So you have the good. Just to recap, is like they can drive innovation. You have competition. You can have various things like if your child is really into to engineering and math or technology, they can go to one of those STEAM or STEM schools. If they want fine arts, it does that instead of, which is good. I think education, American education, which we could talk about the system as a whole, needs to start to fine tune a little more, because you get behavioral issues when a kid who knows what he's going to do is sitting in English 4 reading, Hamlet.
But I'm still feeling like you're getting me really excited, and there's still a strong possibility my family may not get into that school, though.
Yeah, I mean there is, absolutely, and it's it's still picking, it's still number, and we'll kind of go over some of the numbers from a film earlier. So diving into that, let's get into a little bit of the bad. So like the blade the Nazgul wield in Lord of the Rings, the wounds some of these charter schools have inflicted on states may never fully heal. This is some of the negative stuff we're going into. So like some of these charter school plans have really hurt states. Like it happened, and then now it's just festering. Just like Frodo was sitting there, he's turned into a wraith. He's got all the veins and the black. Like some of the states, their budgets and everything is really hurt from this. So let's jump into financial issues. Public schools losing, so like public schools, right? These charter schools get public funds. They're not increasing public funds. Rarely. It's now so like you're dividing the pie, and all teachers out there, we all know what's the one thing we're saying, hey, we need more funding. We have to cut stuff all the time. There's talk of arts being cut at different schools, and some schools cut art programs, which breaks my heart, because that's how you connect to things. If you're a person, so they're losing funding to charters and vouchers. And so a study by the Network for Public Education found that charter schools cost school districts over $400 million in funding each year.
Wow.
To go over there. So like,
almost $500 million, man. Charter is impacting in terms of, give me that.
Yep. Yeah, and it's like, and it's just extra. Like we have to do this because now there's operational things like, hey, we need food for our cafeteria here. That's needs that. We have to run these things. We have to have a maintenance crew. All these things that run a school. Some of them are smaller buildings. You may find a charter school in a strip mall. Where it's just literally a couple of rooms because it's more kind of boutique. But that still needs. You got to pay the rent for the strip mall. You got to keep it running. So there's these people often don't think about that. That where's this money coming from? Now it's being siphoned off. Mayor of Columbia, Chaz Mulder.
Man, great guy.
Yeah, if we got up there, he.
Oh man, you got a tweet from my man. And full disclosure, I think Chaz Mulder's great mayor, great guy, progressive, cares about the community, really doubles down on education. What's he got to say about charter?
Well, he says so some of the for those not familiar with Tennessee, some of the southern counties here under Nashville and Davidson County, where Nashville's at. So some of these southern counties near Alabama, Hickman County, Lewis County, Perry County, and Giles County. So more rural.
Okay,
right. He says these are just a few of the Tennessee counties in our region that do not have private school option. How will the vouchers help and not hurt their public schools? We need to invest and double down on public schools in Tennessee.
I mean, he literally said that. Double down on.
Right.
Let's go.
This is the way to help all Tennesseans. And that's a great point. We often don't think about that because when you think of big cities, there's not a private school in Hickman County.
That's right.
So
he's bringing awareness to, hey, while all the attention is here, right, on the excitement of this versus that, well, in these counties, these communities that don't have those options, period, but are still getting dramatically affected by the funding loss. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, this money is being given. So now what you're doing is you're taking money from the state's taking money from these counties to kind of pool up for charter schools. And then those kids are like watching that money go away, and kids in Nashville are going to a private school. Kids in Williamson County are going to a private school, but they don't even have the option. So it's either drive an hour or just keep going to your school.
So, the old adage, man, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul in this situation.
Yeah,
is what the mayor's kind of addressing there.
Yeah, and he has another tweet just kind of continuing to go along if that says the average cost of private school tuition in Tennessee is $10,000 plus.
Okay.
The $7,000 voucher bill will only benefit those who can already afford it, not to those who don't have a choice for educational opportunities. This is not a conservative approach. This is a reckless use of taxpayer dollars. Yeah, I love the word reckless. Chaz is going for it. Like Chaz feels this.
I'm a diction guy, man. I'm a former English teacher. Right. He's being very intentional there.
Yes. The things he's saying, and I think that's important. That he's like, this is not an issue to where it pays to kind of be on the fence. Like, you're going to pick a side. And Mr. Boulder has said, hey, I've looked at the numbers. This isn't going to help us. And again, that's one of the big negative things about vouchers, especially, is that it only helps the people who can already afford it. It's basically a discount plan for people already sending their kids to to private schools. Like they've already made this. Oh, we're going to pay $10K plus. Well, here's $7K from the state, so now you don't have to pay as much. Well, if you don't have that initially, now you're scrounging around for some money.
Right.
So you're like, oh, we have some, but we still can't pay you the rest.
Even if they gave you 7, but you can't come up with the extra 3. I mean, because you're living paycheck to paycheck, right? So $3,000 is still it's impossible at this point. Mm-hmm. You're out of the conversation regardless.
Yeah. So the people who can are like, oh, cool, we get a discount.
So it's really only serving a certain type of family. Potentially.
Yeah, potentially. Absolutely. And then so another part, so that's a big issue of like, where's this money? It's public money, but it's going here, and is it really helping everybody? Because I guarantee those parents in those counties mentioned, they don't feel like they have choice because there's not an option there. So
Right.
There's also financial mismanagement is a negative thing. Reports of unregulated charter schools failing students, like some have just shuttered. Like I said, they don't, like the kids are doing poorly and then boom, gone. Lack of quality teaching and reporting due to the curricular freedom, right? And here's a great, I always talk about this stuff. I never want people to just think I'm throwing it out there. So I always try to bring some gravitas to it. So Stanford Center for Research on Education Outcomes, called CREDO, found that 46% of charter schools perform no better than public schools, and 37 perform worse.
Wow.
Yeah. So
but performed worse in terms of what?
Basically on the reporting they had to do. Okay. Now we can get into what do they report? What do they have to report? Right. And that's an interesting thing in private schools. A lot of private schools, for example, if they have the facilities to help special education students, and we can get into that, we're getting into that in a second, they often don't have to report those test scores. Well, we do.
Yeah.
Like public schools do. So right there, boom. So there's ways and things you don't have to report. So are the numbers really the numbers?
And I mean, I'll just ask it explicitly, directly. Do charter schools accept students with disabilities? I mean, do they teach students that have individualized education plans? That's an IEP for my parents out there that are trying to understand the inner workings of public charter. If your student struggles, I mean, he or she has legit disabilities, you get an individualized education plan, special education services. They're game changers for kids.
Right.
My son especially. Right. When you have dyslexia and it's obviously, inherent, and you're struggling to read, man, you need those support pieces in place.
You do.
I'm asking directly, do they support students like that?
So they educate proportionally much lower and can simply say, we don't have the facilities. So they can kind of either, now the state has to give them the funds to get that, which again, polling from public schools, which do have the facilities. But if you didn't want your kid there, so they could say, we don't have that, so we need extra money.
They could either say, hey, we don't have that because we don't have that capacity right now or capability right now. But if you continue to fund us, that's what they could always dangle that out there too. Right. We want to, and we'll get there when we get more money in.
Yeah, we need the teachers. We need the room for students, especially the more severe if you want to go. But we need the specialized equipment. We don't have that. So now you're taking that from schools who do have those things, but they just didn't want to go there. And now you're putting in these schools, and they can kind of cherry pick a little more. They don't have where a public high school needs to have a CDC room. So those are more, some of the students.
Oh yeah, intense disabilities for sure.
Where they need, literally whole time they're there, constant, intervention, constant care. They don't take those students at all. Usually.
Right.
So then you get into students with dyslexia, students with some type of, these other issues that may pop up in IEPs, and they can kind of cherry pick we don't have that, so sorry.
And just a fun note, an interesting note, for our viewers here. When you are in a public school that has a CDC classroom, obviously special education classes, those students with those intense disabilities, man, they are going to graduate on a special ed diploma, right? You're going to get them through, make the experience amazing. But when you graduate on a special education diploma, it negatively impacts your graduation rate.
Right.
Okay. So those students who will graduate are graduating with a different diploma, which counts adversely against your graduation rate. So when you're that principal that, you're measured by these
Right.
things, and graduation rate is one of them, that's a tax essentially
Right.
on your
And
graduation rate. But we consume that tax because, hey, this is for the greater good. Man,
Right.
we're helping everyone. If I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't even know if charters get measured on their graduation rate necessarily, but in public school, that's a reality.
Absolutely.
But it does not sound like that's bothering these people or keeping them up at night at all.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing because it's such like a as a principal, you were like, oh yes, like these students have worked so hard, they're about to graduate.
You love
their
it, man.
families pumped.
It's some of the coolest environments you'll be in,
Yeah.
seeing that kind of life-changing work. Big shout out to a teacher named Linda Lamar. She ran the program where I was principal for a while and just did incredible life-changing work. So at the end of the day, I never cared about the impact on the graduation rate. It still is a thing, though.
It's in the back of your mind. and
Yes.
It's awful
I mean-
that is a negative thing. Yeah, and that's they literally, because they have fewer IEPs, individual education plans, because they have those, that affects testing scores. So when they are showing, where a public school has whatever the amount is, and those students, depending on, they have to take
So bring it full circle then. You're saying all of that we just talked about, they're still performing worse than.
Yeah, like with those numbers. And that is changing as numbers go up. Like we'll have to keep an eye on that.
'Cause
But
it's
as
growing.
right now, yeah, you're getting more students there. They're getting more funding. There's more of them. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But, the key point is they don't have to take as many students like that or don't have the facilities. And if they do take them, now we're diverting more funds, which the students who are in high school, like public schools, are getting less funds. So, and then
And it's almost, you've almost hit the sticking point for me, man. I mean, because I do have a son. He's 10 years old. He's in 5th grade. I love the public school where he is. They provide great services. It's an awesome culture and environment. But to think now that those services, those funds that support that incredible work are getting diverted somewhere else that's not held to that same standard. Man, you start looking at that bottom line, the impact on my kid. But you got somebody that's sitting next to you in your community or your next door neighbor that's like, yeah, but my kid needs this kind of environment.
Right.
I mean, you get into pain points for families, right?
Right.
And everybody's going to have, their perspective, their pain point that they want to address.
And that's why the parent choice is such a powerful way to market this.
It is, man,
because
right.
it
What
is
an
like-
umbrella.
Yeah, because you're literally saying, "I'm doing this for my kid."
Right.
And it becomes
Tell me I'm wrong. I'm talking
Right.
about my kid. He's been getting bullied historically his entire public education career.
Right.
You're going to tell me, they don't care about the bottom line on funding.
Yep.
My kid is not thriving in this environment. I want a choice.
Yeah, and so you're turning public education into this kind of clandestine.
Ooh.
I'm this group, you're this group. I'm going to take care of mine. Where the whole idea of it was
Emotions get involved. When do things change, man? When emotions are prevalent.
Yeah, you get parents upset about their kids. It's a tough thing to navigate. So you're taking this public education. We're going to grow our country. Now it's more like, are my people okay? Which definitely is interesting. And kind of to talk about this, there's a great chart where we talk about one of the negatives that we've hit on a little bit, that a lot of the people who go there already are in private school. This chart right here, it's shared by the new NSA, students from public school, private school, or entering kindergarten, right? And you can literally see on here that most of the private school, that's the baby blue in the middle. I mean, that's 66, 69, 64%. Where public schools up here. So that just goes to show that literally this is just basically a coupon for people already in private schools. So are you getting a lot of change out of this by already diverting funds from public schools? So you're helping out the people at private schools. And that's where a lot of people kind of
You're trying to make the argument here that it's not impacting everyone positively. And I mean, even those that want to go there, like, hey, I'm into it, this sounds cool, choices for me, I need the help. I mean, we're flat broke, I'm working 2 jobs, I'm a single parent, but my zone school is in rough shape and I would love my kid to go there. However,
Right.
not for you.
Yeah. And they can say, because the vouchers are open to everybody, they can say, oh, we have this many spots. And the kids get this. So now
It's like that movie Waiting for Superman. Did you ever see that
Yeah,
when it
that's
came
it.
out?
We're- yeah.
You remember when they were sitting in there and it was like a gymnasium or something?
Yep.
They were calling the lotto tickets and you were like watching people's futures crumble. And, I mean, whole families like breaking down when they didn't get picked. That is real? That's essentially what we're talking about?
What happened is the people who are there, they already been accepted, they get this discount. And then they have, we only have X amount for capacity. So now we have 34 spots open this year for the high school. You might have, in that same example, you might have 400 kids sign up for 34 spots.
Right, yeah.
And then they lose, their parents are like, oh, you might go here, and then they don't. And, so that gets into a lot of problems, So we'll look into that. Actually, was there talk about Waiting for Superman a little later once we get into it. But let's look real quick at, controversies, right? So some of the controversies of this, made me think still on swords, just the dark saber. It's been handed down. Who's in charge?
Man. Clone Wars, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's a weird.
Don't pull the nerd out of me, man. That's Mandalorian, right? Darth Maul, the
shaped
dark
like
saber.
a sword, not the round style.
Man, in the Mandalorian show, and dude crashes and he cuts out of that thing. And he's wielding the dark saber.
He looks awesome.
All right, I'm with you.
It's a controversial blade, so we'll use that. One area, big controversy. It is in the news all the time. There are massive cost overruns in the state of Arizona, for example. Massive cost overruns and accountability issues in their universal voucher program. So keyword there, universal. That is where it is just open for anybody. That's where we get into the problem of it becoming more of a discount for people already in. Is that it's universal. So I'm in a private school, I can go. If it's more targeted, it works better. But
right.
Their expansion to universal.
So let's just distill it a little bit for me. If I'm making under $45,000 a year, right, and we're targeting this to help those families to get you in a better school or give you some choice, that's one thing. But this is universal. Yeah. It's for everyone.
Everybody.
Does not matter your tax bracket. Everybody gets a shot. The problem is 500 people have applied, and we've got 16 spots for this.
Right.
And then the school is going to be very subjective on who they're picking in and why. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to go back to that one teacher in Metro Nashville, right, that came out of charters. I mean, he told me straight up, because we were working at a tough inner city school in Nashville. My heart was in that school, but I was also aware enough to say, man, this place is tough.
Right.
So he's telling me it's nothing like this. And that's why people are choosing to work there, because the trade-off is maybe I make less money and I work more hours, but it's ultimately an easier gig.
Right. You're able to do we can all, we worked a lot, or it was, exhausting, as we did in our first couple of episodes. Go check them out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, over exhaustion and teachers. It's exhausting, but that's an exhaustion where you can deal with it. I'm choosing to do this. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
It's a different exhaustion where you're putting out fires or worried about your safety or kids' safety. You're more drained. It's just you go do something on the weekend, you build a deck. You're tired at the end of the day, but you feel good. That's there, as opposed to you're going over and your friend's house is on fire. You're trying to put it down.
Right.
It's much different. So that's what's happening here, is that they are expanding. They're more selective, and they are for example, going back to Arizona, their voucher expansion drained $900 million, so almost $1 billion, from public schools in Arizona in 2024.
In 1 year?
Yeah, which basically highlight the need for tighter regulation. So, and this is what's happening with a lot of this, is that it's ballooning these budgets. We've seen that with states because, again, you say we have this budget, right? Here's our education budget, but we're going to do vouchers and charter schools. Well, you do the vouchers. Way more people sign up for it than you think, but it's universal, so we can't really say no. Then you have the charter schools going, oh, by the way, I do need some facilities. I do need this. So that starts to balloon, because now that you're offering this money to them, you can't really say no, because then you're harming schools. So you're ballooning the state budget and you're siphoning from public education. So this is out there. So some of the people pushing this, you're kind of look at the numbers. That's the hardest part for me to get, is guys, look at the numbers.
Right, but when you're asking people to apply logic on something that's emotionally driven, we really don't care about that. The reality is our experience has not been good here. We want options.
Right. And that's a big thing of them, is options are the thing. We'll worry about it. And that's what a lot of people are doing. We talked about the opportunity to make money off this, the companies opening it, these groups making it. They're kind of willing to ride it out, because it's blowing up the budget, but if they're saying they'll pay for it, then that's cool. We'll maybe see. So a lot of them aren't, there's this big push of, we've been doing public school this way for a long time. Another part of this is, hey, we're falling behind the rest of the world.
Right.
again, problem with that is,
I won't say that second part's true.
right.
But the first part, which we have, this industrial age model of public schools, bell starts here, rings here, move to the next one, conveyor belt kind of style of education model. The other piece, in terms of are we doing well, are we falling behind in the rest of the world, a little bit more subjective there. But I almost feel like you could say, yeah, maybe. I mean, so the argument there can be made, is my point.
Absolutely.
On both of those.
And they do different, but, when you really start to dig down, and here's the crux of it, right? Here's where we get that. A lot of people say, look, we're falling behind countries like Denmark and Sweden, and, we're much more pluralistic, and we shouldn't fall behind them. When you look at it, what has Denmark and Sweden done? They have decided, one, teachers, if you pass rigorous amount of tests, show you're highly qualified, and have good scores, we're going to invest in you. So there's some of the high, teachers in Denmark are literally at the same level mentally for people as doctors, like medical doctors. Oh my gosh, you're a teacher. And you get paid accordingly. So then now that drives this, I have to earn this, that personal mental, look, I have to do all these things to prove I'm highly qualified. So you're going to get better things. Where here in America, it's well, you're a teacher. Why? People say why. And then the state's also here's barely any money to live on. So you're naturally not going to get some of those high, and again, in Denmark, it is an aspiration to be a teacher. If you're smart in something, you're a great biologist, I'm going to go be a teacher. They're going to pay me well. I'm going to get respect. Here it's did you get fired from a bio company and then you just teach biology to pass the time? It's the reverse. So
but in that same vein, that staying on that argument, I don't know. There's no glamour in being a charter school teacher. I'm just saying it doesn't get any more glamorous choosing that option. If anything, it can, I think, just be as challenging in some areas, maybe in terms of lifestyle, especially, and sacrifices you have to make. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Denmark piece, because they're always getting brought up. The Norwegian countries
Those
that are
areas,
always getting referenced as, man, they're just killing it. They're doing great. And it kind of makes sense when you look at it through that lens. Well, look who they have
and what they do. And that's
their model.
Not so much the glamour of being a charter school teacher, but when I was saying that they, you look at these, they use that as we should be this. But charter or public school teacher, what are we doing with it? We should be that, but are we doing the same things? We've talked about it last week a little bit. They take tests in 8th grade. Are you going an academic route, or are you going more of a professional route where you may learn a trade? So again, their test scores that we compare ourselves, we're behind Denmark, we're behind these areas. They're not the same as our test scores, because we're testing everybody who's in the school.
And that's an age-old argument.
Right.
So it's apples to oranges.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Yeah. So when you look at these, people are talking about we have to catch up, and this is the way to do it. But it goes back to that funding public education. Have we tried that yet? We're trying this thing that's ballooning state budgets to see if it works, but we haven't ever tried to be you know what? We're going to give you everything. 10-year period, we're up scores, we're going to make you prove you're good teachers, and see what happens. Instead, we're do better, but we're not going to change much for you, So that's the area. There's a great, in Ohio, another controversy that's happening, tweet from David Pepper, where he's literally talking about, he's almost live tweeting this from as he's hearing it. Last week, newly sworn in Ohio Speaker Huffman, Speaker of the House, declared that the state can't afford to fully and constitutionally fund Ohio public schools. So, and then he says, well, here's a data point every Ohioans need to know. So it's kind of a thread here. The amount of money diverted to pay for the new universal private school vouchers, notice he put private school in there, which largely fund the tuition of students who were already attending private school and could afford that private school last year, is almost the exact same amount as the state shortfall in fully funding the bipartisan public school funding plan.
That's a loaded statement, man.
Yeah. And that amount of money being diverted from meeting that obligation will only grow, eventually topping $1 billion. And then he goes on to say they're playing a shell game, siphoning off $1 billion plus to serve certain interest, then crying poor when it comes to their constitutional responsibility. Public schools in every corner of Ohio are paying the price. Here's the big thing I really want to get from this. Here's another data point. 0%. Okay. That's the amount of additional state revenue going to students in public schools since 1997, adjusted for inflation. They're basically bleeding public education dry.
0%.
Those are the facts. 0%. So like when you adjust, they haven't said, oh, like inflation's up. So it's literally
right.
We're at some schools in Ohio, they're operating on the same amount of money they were in 97.
Have you, when you get into school budgets, have you heard of like maintenance of effort?
Yeah.
So sometimes budgets get passed with a maintenance of effort budget, which is like, look, we don't really want to give you any more money, but we can't give you less than we did last year. So we're going to do a maintenance of effort budget, which is like just above what we gave you last year. I mean, by a hair maybe, if not the same. So yeah, 0%, man, since 1999 is just staggering.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and that's kind of the issue. So we're diverting almost $1 billion to do this, but we haven't increased that. And that goes to that argument of like a lot of people are funding that. So with, and then you have Florida. Okay. So we've done Arizona, budget blowing up. Ohio, they're now saying they can't fund public schools, but there's $1 billion going here when they haven't really tried to fund public schools. Florida, the voucher fund supporting unaccredited or low-performing private schools. Again, not needing to be accredited. They have a massive teacher shortage due to a lack of support and funding for teachers. And then when Florida expanded their ESA, right, their educational saving account programs, nearly half of the state's new ESA recipients came from families earning 400% over the federal poverty level.
Wow.
So only 1/3 came from families getting free and reduced lunch. So, when we say, oh, it's not really fair, some people may have feelings about charter schools, and we're just giving you some numbers here, right? Like these are like starts to see it. So basically 400, like families earning 400%. So that basically for a family of four, that kind of boils down to they're making around $125,000, for a family of four for salary of both parents. It's not exactly
you're throwing out just crazy figures in this episode. We're talking about, we've mentioned 900 million, 0%, It's just, when you really start to peel that and look at the hard numbers, the impact on, man. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's some of the issues with this. So that's what we're looking at. That's why we're talking about it, because I think people need to be informed on that. They need to understand like where some of these numbers and facts, because it does, like, if you literally walked up to me and was like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm going to give you an option. Your kid can either go to the public school, or we'll give you $7,000 to go to a charter school or a private school, so you can pick where your kid goes. Like, logically, that sounds good. I'd be like, cool. Maybe I'll like my school. I choose not to leave. Maybe I don't. But these are the numbers that really matter. And then we're going to have issues later down the road. And we don't want public schools shuttering their doors because we can't fund them. And then you get into privatized education, and that's kind of a scary thing. We don't want students left behind, not to make a pun, but
right.
So
when you start talking about the privatization piece, man, it just makes me think of prisons, bro. I mean,
right.
When we privatize the prison model, and that in order to keep that profitable, that means we have to have people in here. So at the end of the day, it's not about, recidivism, and it's not about really helping someone overcome these issues. It's about keeping these beds full, because that's how we make money.
Right. And that's what you want it based off. Let's educate kids. That's what you want it based off. So some heavy stuff there, right? Yeah. Some like heavy, so let's, take a little break.
Yeah, lighten it up.
Yeah, man. Take a little thing. So the other day, I was literally, I've been on the sword kick. That's why I saw like double-edged swords. So I was on the sword kick, and I was just sitting there. I was like, man, at my house, we have this cabin outside that we got, we built, we insulated, it ran electric. It's beautiful inside. It's kind of like our bonus room now, because we don't really have a big bonus room. And once my kids are kind of done using it, they're all getting older now, I'm going to turn that into like kind of a man cave, little out there. So I was like, I need some cool posters. So I popped over to our friend, to our great friend, popcatalog.com.
Absolutely, man.
They got, folded posters there, which is the way they originally did it. So it's like, you got that crease in it, so it's legit.
Vintage.
Yeah. And you get some, you can get some action figures if you want there. You can get actual discs. So it's a great place to I was thinking like, how can I make this like even cooler? Like when you walk in, it's like, ooh, this is a neat little room. So I went over to Pop Catalog, looked at those things. Pop on over there.
Popcatalog.com.
Yeah, popcatalog.com. Yeah. Pop on over there. Look at VHSs, DVDs, CDs, posters, action figures, video games. They have it all. Elevate your collection. So today we're going to look at, staying with the sword thing, we're going to look at a little bit for our Pop Catalog pop quiz here. Love good swords. So I'm going to ask you this.
All right.
What actor has been in more sword fights on screen or stage than any other actor is working?
All right, I'm with it. Go.
So, some options here. That way you're not just picking. Is A, Sir Richard Harris. Great actor. He was the
Richard Harris, A Man Called Horse, bro.
Right, he was the original Dumbledore for people who are kind of more modern. He's in Count of Monte Cristo. Great stage actor too.
Richard Harris in the movie Unforgiven.
Oh man, yeah,
powerful. And he was older in that.
Yes.
But anyway, great actor. Okay.
Yeah, so you got Sir Richard Harris. We have B, Ewan McGregor. Obi-Wan Kenobi, right?
Okay.
We have C, Orlando Bloom. So he's been Legolas. He's been in the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay.
And then we have D, Christopher Lee, who was Count Dooku, who was Saruman, and so many other films. So which one are you thinking? What do you think?
Oh man. I'm gonna rule the two newest guys out. I'm saying, I'm gonna get down to my 50-50, and I'm thinking it's either A or D, and then out of those two, I'm gonna go Christopher Lee.
You are correct.
I got that right.
Let's
go.
Lee, yeah. Saruman, that's why he as he played Count Dooku in there, he had so much training that he actually had to slow down when he would fight because he was so and Hayden Christensen put a lot of work in, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing? And he literally. He's been on so many plays. He's done Shakespearean plays. I think the last count they said he was in over 700 sword fights.
Wow.
So it's that's a really cool. As Christopher Lee, you could see him up there. He's great as Count Dooku. Great voice.
Out to me.
Right. That was a great job, man. I thought that Richard Harris or the Orlando Bloom would get you because you think of 3 movies for Lord.
Sure.
Shoot, even The Hobbit.
I'm just thinking of this dude's catalog,
oh,
man. No way Orlando Bloom holds a candle to that
you look at some of the things he's done in his career. Great actor. Obviously he's passed away, so R.I.P. Christopher Lee, but great as Saruman too. Doesn't really use he's that voice is great. When he's standing up on the hill or up on Orthanc, going
now was he the guy who did all the vampire, the Dracula films, the Hammer films from back in the day? Or
I believe he was in at least 1 or 2.
Okay.
Like I said, his catalog. If you go on IMDb and look it up, it's dang man, you've done some things. Yeah.
But I'm thinking Count Dooku, the dark side, charters, undermining public.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he's a really good
Sith.
As Count Dooku. He is that because he was so eloquent. He wasn't one of those guys who are oh, I'm joining the dark side because I'm pure evil. He just literally was I disagree with you.
He didn't believe with the ideology of the Jedi,
and he wanted more power.
Split, right?
And he had the separatists because he could talk, and that's kind of a lot of what we're, what's happening here is it sounds good, oh, this is being good, but
last nerd fact on him, and we'll move on. Man, he was Qui-Gon Jinn's
Yes,
his
he trained him.
Right?
And
he was a bad dude in the
Yoda
Star Wars
was
universe before he goes bad. Right?
Yeah, he was Yoda's Padawan, and then Qui-Gon Jinn was his Padawan.
And shout out to Christopher Lee, man. Been in the most sword fights.
Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
I just wonder if he was at home, just messing around. He's this is
really
what I do.
Cut a dude's arm off.
Right. So let's look at let's think so we've talked about the numbers, we've explained what they are. Let's kind of look at what everybody thinks. Let's go around. So we're going to reforge, staying with the sword, we're reforge Narsil, right? Return of the King, they take the shards of Narsil, which cut the ring off Sauron's hand, and they made Endril, which is the flame of the West, and it's about the people, so that's what we're looking at. So let's first start with teachers, all right? What are teachers feeling about this? Well, kind of talking to them, kind of looking, there's frustration over loss of resources, obviously, when things are being cut.
Right.
They're insulted here. So one of the things here in Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee, governor in Tennessee, he's really pushing a voucher thing. A lot of teachers are insulted that literally he's kind of bribing them, that he said if they pass, if his voucher bill passes, then he'll give teachers a one-time payment of $2,000. People are so cool, $2,000,
right.
And then
you tell them that right before Christmas.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And it's it's kind of insulting because it makes you feel cool, so you'll maybe siphon funds and some poorer schools will close, but I got $2,000, one time.
It is, man.
And that's kind of insulting because it's again, the whole argument is fund public schooling, pay teachers, and teachers are even there's this big perception they're a bad teacher. I've worked in a couple schools. I've very rarely seen a teacher just bad. You know what I mean? People are trying hard. So if they were hey, we're going to increase standards, we're going to check you a little deeper, therefore to pay you more, most teachers are let's go. I'll do the work. I'm already doing the work. I'll do the work. We're already doing a good job. So they're kind of a little, a lot of teachers are kind of angry at that. There's a fear by teachers of being forced to compete in an unequal system. If they're, the last thing we want, we all work hard. Teachers are doing a great job. We're working hard. The last thing you want is sit in a meeting, have your principal be, and this is not against the principals because they just have have your principals talk to you about we're not performing well enough, where, like we just talked about, we know they're maybe not reporting the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you guys need to do more. It's like, is this equal?
Yeah, it's hard to make that argument. It's only going to exacerbate this already contentious relationship between public, charter, and I've always wondered, you put a charter teacher right next to a public school teacher. I mean, they're just sitting side by side.
Right.
I mean, they're both teachers.
Yeah.
Like, they're both trying to help kids.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, one is being measured differently, way, differently than the other. And it's just ultimately unfair, man.
Yeah.
So to hold those teachers to that kind of standard, that kind of accountability measures is unfair.
It is. And that's what teachers are worried about. And then, again, this is just when you get this other option and you're worried about all those things, nobody likes to do anything in an area of instability. We want to know, like, hey, we're supported. Hey, we got this. And now it's like, oh, well, they're going to say we're doing a bad job and this happened. So that's one of the things teachers are feeling. Let's go to parents. Okay, switch over to parents. Mixed reaction, honestly. The support from those who, with successful charter voucher experiences, obviously, if you go to a school, your kid is happy you're doing that. They're like, this is amazing. But then you talk to other ones and their school shuttered, or their school had some type of controversy, or the person in charge of it was making $300,000 a year. And some of those funds were kind of like, there's some fishy accounting going on. So it's really split. And then you get this perception. You literally brought it up earlier of Davis Guggenheim's Waiting for Superman, the documentary we talked about. I mean, remember how much publicity that got?
Oh, it was major. I was working in Metro Nashville at the time. They took us all to go see it.
Right.
I mean, like the entire district, dude.
That's crazy.
180 schools.
I've never seen a documentary.
People, and they had all of us go see that at that time.
Yeah, I've never seen a documentary get that much. There were segments on NBC about the documentary. There were like Good Morning America was doing it, like not since basically anything Morgan Freeman narrates, as a documentary. Like, I can't remember, there's a penguin one that that got huge pub.
That's right.
Right. But like this was like about education.
March of the
got
Penguins,
it.
Man.
Yeah. That was a great, that's it. March of the Penguins. So Stanford, like basically the perception of that movie though, if you go look at it again, like I watched a few clips, the perception is just public school teachers are awful. And schools are bad, so charters.
Man, I remember they've got that bit in there. Remember, it's like the padded room, or where they're just showing maybe New York City.
Yes, I think a lot of those New York City
teachers who are literally getting paid. They show up on the job, but they go to this room every day because they're either not good enough or whatever they've done. But maybe they're protected under a union. It's real anti-union. I remember that. Yeah, it's very anti-union in that.
Yeah, so I mean, but it's all focused on teachers, but you don't look at a lot of the outside reasons some of these schools. Like Stanford economist Raymond sponsored a study showing that teachers statistically account for around 10 to 20% of the achievement outcomes. So teachers are the most important factor within a school.
Right.
But you have there's parents, there's poverty. Like this, that type of film doesn't look at poverty. It doesn't look at any of those issues that affect all those things, right? And we've talked about it before. And, book I'm finishing up is, the two backpacks. Like there's other things that kids have to deal with that doesn't, like I said, if you're worried about when you're going to eat, it's really hard to focus on algebra, and put the care into it. So that's kind of where it goes into. So that movie is just like, it made it look like these charter schools are going to save. And that was 2009.
Right.
And here we are in 2025. And
right. So it wasn't the panacea that they were pitching it to be at the time.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and then, so going off of that, where teachers are 10 to 20%, University of Washington economist Dan Goldhaber said about 60% of achievement is explained by non-school factors such as, again, family, income, all of that. So when you're looking at charter schools, it's even like you have these vouchers. There's such a this public perception. And the problem is there's not much of a way for teachers to fight against that, because all we can say is, no, I'm doing a good job. And we're not reporting the same thing. So that's a kind of an uphill thing that parents are seeing. Like, they are seeing what's kind of being pushed of this. And so parents out there, talk to your teachers, literally email them, go to the school, look, obviously schedule it, just ask to, talk to them and be there and feel the vibe. You'll be surprised, I think, because schools really try, schools care. Like I said, it's a profession of care of this.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to your point, obviously I've been a principal, assistant principal in multiple counties, and there are ineffective teachers, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, but it's been my experience that any principal worth their salt is doing their best to either A, build capacity, grow that teacher, or B, grow or go. I mean, exercising you out of the building if you just can't get to where we need you to be, which is effectively teaching kids, helping them learn at a level that impacts our accountability measures the right way. So I just think that, there are going to be ineffective teachers, but it has been my experience, man, we're working to either improve them or get them somewhere else where they can be successful so we can get the right person in here.
Yeah, and I think there's, and I totally agree with you, and I think that's a great thing. And I think because education is so personal, there's this perception that we're just hiding those teachers. Like you said, that padded room is like teacher jail. Like you're not good enough to be in the class. You've done something bad, but we can't fire you. And that's not, it's like any other business. Like if you're not doing it, they do try to support, they try to grow. And if you can't cut that, they, like you said, they let you go. And I think there's a perception that schools don't do that we just keep, oh, well, John hasn't opened a book in 12 years, but we sure do love him, so we'll let him keep teaching.
Because people are familiar with the word tenure.
Yeah.
And I think tenure is that knee-jerk reaction of like, hey, man, dude's tenured, man. Good luck. You know? Yeah. And there is a reality to that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll speak to that directly. There is a reality to that. There are measures that can be taken against that, but it's still really challenging. So even still, there's some underlying truth there in what's happening. That particular documentary just chose to only show that and make it seem like this is how everything is.
Yeah, and so then you get to like politicians, right? Proponents, right? Like, so Tennessee Republicans right now are obviously behind Governor Lee's thing. They're basically saying it's empowering families, improving education of his voucher push. Then you also have critics, right? Like the Arizona Democrats are saying public money should not fund private education. Because then you get into this, we talked about curriculum, like what are they actually teaching? And then like looking at this, according to all4ed.org, they have an annual report. There's a bipartisan support for increasing public school funding over vouchers. Like, so this is bipartisan. Okay. And you kind of see this post on X, this little like pie chart comes up. And it literally looks, when asked to choose, majorities of Democratic and Republican voters prefer increasing funding for public schools over vouchers. You're looking at 82% Democrats want public schools funded. That tracks.
Okay.
Then you look at all voters, like just mixing them all up, independents, everything, 68% want it. And you look at Republicans only, 58%. So
still more than half.
Yeah, so like there's this idea that people don't want to fund it. It's wrong. It's just, are the politicians going to listen to that? Literally, they asked, as they were kind of walking in, one of the Tennessee's House Representative members were asked, your local school district does not want, they literally voted, we do not want charters. Does that affect your decision on how to vote? And he just flat looked at the camera and said, no. You know, so when you have politicians not serving their people, especially when boards say that, this is when you get in this area.
And that's happening in a county nearby.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that vote come up a couple of times, get voted down, but there may or not be, politicians that are still pushing that particular agenda. So to that point, I mean, I've seen that play out.
You got
IRL,
literally the will of the people.
In real life, I've seen that.
You got the will of the people right here. You work for the people, right? Like the House Representatives of Tennessee, the people.
So then you're back to your conspiratorial agenda.
Right, yeah. Like you're sitting there like,
gotcha,
oh,
man.
why?
You've brought us full circle.
I have. That's what I try to do. I
get
sneak
it
in.
It makes sense.
So final thing here, right? Let's look at it. So what all of this happens. So we just talked about parents, teachers, politicians, how they're looking at this. So what can we do? Let's do a little call to action here.
Come on.
Right? So like, again, we've taken Narcil, we've reforged it, figured out. Now we got Andrew, the flame of the West. We're fighting. We're moving forward. We're not going to take the old way. So for teachers, what can they do? Join unions. Like be a part of that union, however you feel about that. Advocacy groups, like be aware. Don't let this just hit you in the head.
And I know people can get knee-jerk on unions.
Yeah, right.
To me, when I hear that, get involved.
Get
involved. Get informed. Get involved. Take action.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, just don't sit the keyboard jockey, two thumbs, blasting on social media. I mean, get informed and get involved in real life. If that means being a part of that union, then double down on that. But go into it with this attitude of, I want to learn more, and I want to see how I can make my actions, my vote count.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. It's not just join a union. It's just like advocacy groups. Be a part of it. Email, call your rep. Like look up their number. Say, oh, this is who represents me in the state house. Let them know, hey, I don't want this. Or if you do want it, I do want this. Be a part of it. Don't just let it happen to you. And for, like I said, stay informed about local policies. Go to those meetings. Speak out at board meetings. Like if voices aren't heard, people silence is concession. Right? If they're like, oh, we're going to vote, and there's not many teachers there to say, hey, we don't want this. This is why I don't want it. They're not getting those data points, and they're just like, okay, must be okay.
Some of the powerful things I've seen, I know you're talking about parents, but is when like a student comes up at a board meeting, speaks from the heart, but they're prepared, they're informed, and they're just railing on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. So, get up, speak at a board meeting.
Right.
I mean, anyone can do that. All you got to do is sign up. I know there's some protocols and things like that, but everybody's voice can be heard at those board meetings.
Yeah.
Great
Let
point.
it be heard.
Great point.
For parents, research your schools thoroughly before enrolling your children, right? You don't want to send them to a charter school if that's what you choose that shutters the doors or has some issues. But you also don't want to just have your school, don't assume your public school is bad. I see so much of that.
Yeah.
People just assume like, oh, it must be terrible.
Because that's the narrative,
right.
man.
And that's what we're trying to change a little bit here. Look at, and this is what parents often, you kind of look at one or the other. Look at quantitative data, right? So look at their test scores, graduation rates. You can find that a lot of different places for each school. But also look at qualitative data, like any surveys that measure student family satisfaction. The type of curriculum they do, school belief on discipline. Learn those things because that's like the heart of a school. That's where your that quantitative data, the qualitative stuff is pushing towards what they want to achieve. So kind of find out those things. Again, what does your school think, especially if you are looking at a charter school?
Get the full perspective,
right?
Get the
numbers,
full picture
feelings
on this, right?
Yeah. Don't just go in and be like, oh, it's bad.
Right.
Demand transparency, accountability if you do to a charter school and voucher programs. These are popping up in our areas, especially down here. They're talking about needing to build them. They don't have the building, so build them. That's public funds.
Right.
Literally say like, hey, okay, well, we want, if you're going to do this, we want this and this and this to figure it out, because that's, if we're truly doing parent choice, then we should demand transparency. Legislative example, exam and standardized tests. Again, we talked about it draining $900 million in Arizona.
That figure right there,
create
man.
regulations. Like we can't jump into this with just no guardrails. And if they're just diverting public funds, like we can't, Tennessee had a surplus. We can't go 900 in the red. We don't want that. 900 million in the red. So the legislatures need to make sure there's guardrails. Don't just jump on this. So there's a lot of discussion. That's why we're talking about it here today, is because we want to start discussion. This is an issue that's coming at education, coming at educators, and we need to talk about it, give you facts. So that's why we are here.
No, I think it's one of the hottest button issues
Absolutely.
currently. And again, it goes back to that emotion piece. This is my kid. This is our experience. We want choice. Anytime you get into that emotional crucible there of people and their children, so again, get informed, both logic and feelings, right? You want the quantitative and the qualitative.
Yes.
Get the full picture. Get to know your zone school.
Yeah.
Get the tour. Meet the principal. Hear from staff, but get to know that school before you throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you've heard only bad things about public school.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that school, when you walk in and you get the tour, it's going to be the same as if you weren't there because we can't control that many kids. It's not like you put on a dog and pony show where like everybody stay in your seats. There's a parent walking through.
Right.
Doesn't
like
happen.
They care.
Yeah, you're going to see exactly what your kid would see if they were there. And you can get that vibe. Like go in there, and principals love, they like giving tours. They have a lot to do, but they like it. They like showing the things
I'm
built.
going to throw this in real quick. I heard this one time. So, we constantly ask our kid, how was your day? How were things today? Or what'd you learn today? And you don't get much out of a kid.
Yeah.
But I heard somebody position it like this one time. Ask your child what they saw today.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Hey, what'd you see today?
Yeah.
And just listen.
Yeah.
What'd you see today at school? Oh, man.
Yeah.
I saw this. Or, oh, man, we saw this.
We did this.
Yeah, it's just a different way to frame it to try to get, because I think at the end of the day, man, talk to kids. Man, talk to children. It's one of the things I think we just don't do a good enough job at.
Right.
Speak to children about their experiences in school. And it's not always easy to get that information out of them, so reframing it with them, what did you see today?
Yeah, they'll just talk
at
forever.
school?
Because
That's
it's like when you say, what'd you learn today? They're like, I mean, you know my schedule.
Man. Yeah, exactly.
I learned math.
Even my 10-year-old son, we
learned
did
history.
this.
Yeah.
Yes, I had art today.
Yeah, Liam will be like, fractions. I'm like, well, what about fractions? You know?
But what did you see today? Oh, man, I saw this. I mean, just a different way to frame
And I'd
it.
add to that writing and research in my book, the 2 backpacks about what like teens are thinking and feeling. If they're naturally going to kind of go probably a little drama-based thing or something kind of crazy, I will tell parents and stuff, don't react negatively. They don't be like, well, you shouldn't be around because that'll close them off.
Just listen.
Just
right?
listen.
You're
Yeah.
just listening at
Yeah.
this point,
And
right?
just like
it is hard to do. You're right.
You don't want your kid like, oh, there was a food
parental
fight.
control. You should have been anywhere
I
near
threw
that.
an
Why were you
olive.
even close to that?
Right,
How
yeah.
were you even in a position to see that? Right.
Yeah,
Just
listen. Keep that
listen.
trust open because then you'll notice they'll start eventually. If you do that enough and correctly, they'll sit down next to you and be like, guess what happened at school today? And you're like, I didn't even ask.
Do you have parenting tips like that and stuff in your book?
Yeah,
on the 2 backpacks?
absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of it's building that connection of like, so we're trying to understand teens better, and that's like one of it is like they want to reach out, but then they're also afraid of being judged. And if parents are always in that disciplinarian mode, like even not like go to your room, but like, oh, don't be around that person or you shouldn't be near that
Door closed.
Yeah, then they're like, all right, well, you don't care about anything.
I'm not gonna yell. Why would I tell you what I saw? I'm going to yell at.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of good stuff like that. Hopefully it'll help. So closing thought, one thing, we're really going to think about it, put it out there, and then once you have if you have something you want to say, email us at educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com. But if the goal is truly student success, how do we balance innovation of these new vouchers and charter schools, like we're innovating things, and equity in education?
Yeah.
So it's kind of something to think about, like how do we balance those two? Like we are trying to change the system, and you can't discredit them like this is something that's different. It's a shakeup, kind of like Linda McMahon we talked about being possibly Secretary of Education. It's a shakeup, but also equity. Like if we're going to give funds here, are we giving more or less to public schools? We can't lose that just because it says public in front of it.
And look, I know the current climate, so I'm just going to say it. Man, equity is not a bad word.
No.
Man, equitable. I'm the underdog's advocate. That's been my persona in education for a long time. I'm going to fight for that student that needs support, that needs that kind of advocate. So equity to me, not a bad word. We want to ensure that students everywhere are getting the kind of game-changing education that they deserve. This is your constitutional right, free public education. So equity to me, not a bad word, but I love your question because I'm an innovative guy. I mean, I like to think I am, right? So how do we balance? We want to push this conversation forward. Man, we don't want to serve under an archaic model that's no longer benefiting, the majority. So we want to balance this innovative approach while also keeping equity so that our students, man, are getting those needs met. I think of my own son with that dyslexia piece and the great work that's gone on at his school, special education services. Man, those things matter. They're important, just like anti-bullying campaigns and getting students out of bad situations matters. I understand and represent and respect all of that. Just get informed so that you have the clearest picture possible. But man, it's such a great question to close with, man. It's balancing innovation and equity.
Yeah, because you want to change things. You want things to be better, but you, like I said, you can't start leaving people behind. You can't start leaving, schools or programs out of schools. We don't ever want, I don't want a football team to stop being able to play football because they don't have the funds. I don't want an art program to stop doing that because they don't have the funds because we're trying this. So, there are still kids in these public schools. There are kids in these charter schools. Let's make sure it's equitable. That's what we're talking about. So I think it's a lot of information today. I think it was super cool to talk about it because it is so deep. We could probably do a 5-hour podcast on this. There's so much stuff out there. So I had a lot of fun, and thank you everybody for joining us today on Educational Warfare. Charter schools and vouchers are reshaping education. They are here. But whether for better or the worse depends on all of us, just like Dr. Jackson said, staying informed and engaged. Don't let it tire you out. Don't let it make it be like, I've talked about this, I've gone to meetings, and it's still coming back up. Be engaged, fight for education. That's why we're here on Educational Warfare. So we all have that, Ryan, thank you for being here today.
Oh, absolutely.
Tommy, Matt.
Great conversation today.
Yeah.
My final thought would be for not only educators, but I'm thinking of parents out there, stakeholders, community members, industry leaders, right? You have a voice exercise that voice. Get involved, be heard, get informed. Man, great conversation today. Great information today. So,
yeah, so we're
awesome
hoping to
episode.
inform people. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So for Tommy, for Matt, for Dr. Jackson, I am Dr. Jordan Lauer saying thank you for listening, thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of the fight.